Being different doesn't make you any less good. This man adopted the most unwanted cat from his shelter. Weeks later, he got a huge surprise. When staff opened the door of the shelter one morning, they saw a box in front of it. They already knew that someone had probably decided they didn't want an animal and abandoned it at their doorstep. It was a sad reality that this happened often. They opened the box and found one tiny kitten inside. He was the cutest little ball of fluff. However, he didn't look exactly like other cats. When they checked him out, they found that the kitten was born without a nasal bridge. The nasal bridge is the bone in the nose that gives it structure. Because of this, the cat looked unique. He was overall pretty healthy, although his nose was more closed up than other cats. A lot of people that came to the shelter were only interested in adopting a baby animal. For once, it would work in their favor, and the shelter believed the cat would find a forever home in no time. Sadly, didn't happen. There were a lot of people who came into the shelter and asked to see the kittens, but when they saw Monty, as they called him, they weren't interested. Some said that they didn't want a broken cat, and there were those who just said he wasn't what they were looking for. He was a sweet kitten who loved humans, but none of the prospective adopters were interested in showing him the same type of unconditional love. They couldn't see beyond the way he looked. They wanted the perfect tiny kitten that would work in all their photos for their social media accounts. But they would come to regret this later. It was not all a waste of time, though. Some of the families that couldn't find the kitten of their dreams did end up adopting older animals that might not have found a family otherwise. There were also those who preferred going on a waiting list to be informed as soon as new kittens arrived. New litters of kittens came and went, but Monty stayed at the shelter. He would have friends to play with for a while when new kittens came in or were born in the shelter, but soon they would be adopted, and he would stay behind. He never got the chance to find his forever family. Then one day, one family walked past the kitten room, and they saw Monty. He wasn't a tiny kitten anymore, but he was still very young. They didn't mind the way he looked. The teenage girl thought it was cute, and they asked to spend some time with him to see if they fit. Everything was going well. Monty was being charming, allowing the family to pet him and play with him. They scratched his head, and he laid down so they could adore him even more. The family had made up their mind that they would take Monty. Then something happened that changed everything. He had been running around and playing, and that meant he was a bit out of breath, just like any animal would be. He was used to the size of his shelter, and playing this much was not usual. Because he was breathing just a tiny bit heavier than he normally did, he started sneezing. The family was horrified. They believed that they had almost taken home an animal that was terribly sick. The shelter staff tried to explain that he sneezed a lot because he was born without his nasal bone, but the family was too angry and distraught to listen. They accused the staff of trying to trick them into adopting a cat they called defective. They were convinced that Monty was sick and that the shelter knew. They refused to look at another animal at the shelter. According to them, if one of the kittens were sick, then they were all likely sick. Once again, Monty was left without a family. After having a fun day of playing, it was heartbreaking to take him back to his room. This was the first hopeful interaction in months, and now Monty had missed out on that family too. Everyone tried to take comfort in the fact that if the family was so easily put off by a few sneezes, then they likely wouldn't be a good fit for the cat anyway. They just hoped they would care for the animal they did end up adopting. That was the last time for a very long while that Monty had any family trying to visit him and adopt him. He had become an adult now, and adult cats were a lot harder to place than kittens. If they couldn't find him a home when he was a baby, then they had little hope of finding him a home now as an adult. He might have missed his moment. At least he was lucky with the shelter he was abandoned at. They were a no-kill shelter. Monty would have a home with them for the rest of his life if he needed it. They just hoped he didn't. The sweet cat deserved to have a family and live in a home, but as he grew older, they worried about him more. Eventually, he was living in the adult room. He liked to play with other cats, but when new strays were brought in, they always seemed to pick on him. Many of the cats in his room at the shelter tried to pick a fight with Monty, but he didn't want to fight. He would rather hide in a corner or underneath a cat bed than fight with them. It was sad for the staff, but they only had so many rooms, and he never got hurt because he avoided those confrontations. But a day came when everything was going to change. Michael came to the shelter because he wanted to get his wife a new dog. They had lost their elderly rescue, and now they were ready for another one. His wife didn't want to come to the shelter because she would want to adopt all the animals. It was easier to have Michael pick. He walked past the cat rooms on his way to the dog enclosures when one cat caught his eye. Monty was sitting in a corner. It looked like he was trying to make himself smaller while other cats were taking a swipe at him. Michael alerted the staff, who took Monty out of there right away. A new cat was making a lot of trouble. Michael checked out the cat, and one look into that adorable face and sad eyes, and he knew he was lost. By then, Monty was 3 years old, and he had spent his entire life in the shelter. Michael scratched the cat's head and he leaped over to the man. Then he just cuddled up to him. He was normally shy. Years in the shelter had made him so. But it seemed that he was completely comfortable with Michael. He had never cuddled up to a stranger before. The man had planned on getting a dog, but it looked like the plan was going to change. Then the cat suddenly started sneezing. The staff all felt defeated and worried. Had Monty just blown his chances of getting a home? When they explained why he was sneezing, it all made sense to Michael. He didn't even care when they told him that the cat had a leaky bladder that needed to be watched. Whatever issues the cat came with would be handled. That was what you did when you adopted an animal. He was in love, and he believed that he had gone to the shelter to find Monty. He just hoped that his wife would see it that way too. He video called her with Monty in his arms. He had a whole speech prepared on why they had to take the cat. He would tell her how long Monty was in the shelter and that this might be the only chance he had of the family. Then she answered the call, and none of that was needed. She looked at the cat, and she told Michael to bring Monty home as soon as he could. After more than 3 years in a shelter, Monty was finally getting a home. He had spent most of his life in the shelter, but now he was going to have a wonderful family. From the moment that they brought him home, Monty loved cuddles. There was nothing he loved more than a nap in Michael's arms. But they did see signs of his years in the shelter. He would jump at any big noises. He was quick to run and hide under the table. They had to be very calm and loving with him. And bit by bit he came out of his shell and started playing. They wanted to take him to their vet to get checked out and make sure he was healthy. At the same time, they were worried that it would freak out the cat, which was already traumatized in some ways. But there was nothing to worry about. The cat loved all the attention he got at the vet. The fact that he got a fishy treat probably helped too. It seemed that he loved meeting new people and loved getting attention from anyone. The vet did agree that he had a leaky bladder. They would place a liner on the spot where he loved to sleep. Then if something did happen, they could easily clean it up and discard it. One morning, his adopted mom woke up and couldn't find Monty anywhere. Then she saw him hiding behind an end table. She noticed the liner on his bed was wet, and she threw it away. The cat was distraught by having an accident, but there was nothing he could do about it. Having him feel bad wouldn't help anyone. They called him and bribed him to come out of his hiding spot with treats. Then they gave him extra love and attention. It was going to take a while, but they wanted him to understand that they weren't mad when he had an accident in his sleep. The cat had been with them for a while, but they were just starting to know him. The man had adopted this unwanted cat from the shelter. Now it was weeks later, and he got a huge surprise. They couldn't believe how loving and sweet Monty turned out to be. He was such a great example of why looks shouldn't matter when adopting an animal. They wanted to share his story, and they created social media pages about the cat. They hoped that their story would help other animals who looked different to get adopted more easily. But they couldn't even imagine the impact his story would have on one child in particular. Joshua was a shy kid who was badly bullied. He knew his family loved him, but he felt so unlovable. It wasn't always easy to feel their love in his heart. After a hard day at school, his mom helped to cheer him up by watching cute animal videos on social media with him. That was when they first saw Monty. The boy was only 10, but he had been through some hard things already. Joshua loved watching Monty, but a part of him was skeptical. He couldn't believe that it was all real. How could people love an animal so much if it had real issues? The boy thought that they were faking the way that Maddie looked, or they didn't love him as much as they said they did. What he was saying broke his mother's heart. She knew that he only believed this because that was how he saw himself. Joshua was born with a cleft palate, and even after surgery, he had a big scar on his mouth. Many children teased him for his looks. At only 10, the boy was depressed, and his family didn't know how to help him. He was in therapy, and they did everything they could, and yet he was slipping further away from them. Monty's videos were the first thing in which he had shown any interest in months. When his mom saw that they were in the same city, she took a chance and reached out to Michael and his wife. She explained that Monty had become a beacon of hope, but still, the child didn't really believe it was true. Maybe if Joshua could see the unconditional love they had for the animal, he could see himself as worthy too. The couple video called the family and made sure that it was all legit. And then they invited Joshua and his mom for a visit. Joshua barely said a word as he was so shy, but as soon as he sat down, something incredible happened. Monty came right up to the boy, and he placed his head against Joshua's. He purred, and it almost looked like he was trying to speak to the child. Joshua had tears in his eyes, as did all the adults, especially when the child whispered, "He really likes me." They had a lovely visit, and for the first time the boy could understand how you could love something that didn't look like some thought of as normal. It was a sad goodbye, but the visit hadn't just inspired Joshua. His mother had gotten a great idea, too. She searched everywhere until she found Joshua the perfect pet, a pup who had a cleft lip just like he had. It changed everything. Even when children teased him, he knew how much he loved his dog and how much his dog loved him. That comfort helped him through a lot. Monty had changed that family's lives completely. He spent so much time in his shelter because people didn't want him. But now he had a family that would love him for the rest of his life. Not only did he have love, but his story inspired many others. What did you think about this story? Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more.